Hi, I'm Gail Minogue, and I'm happy to see you again. Thanks for watching. And remember, you can always go to my website, Gail Minogue, Minogue, like Kylie Minogue.com, GailMinogue.com, and get in touch with me if you need anything, or my book, Divine Design, How You Created the Life You Are Living Now. So anyway, today I'm going to talk about two numbers that people really don't talk about very much, and those are the numbers number 5 and number 8. And these numbers are not what I call the most prominent numbers that you hear about. People don't speak about the number 5 that much and the number 8 that much, but I want you to get a little background on this. Remember, numbers run the show. They run everything in the order of the universe, because one of the first things you know and learn early is that there is an order here. And it never fails. It's called the universal laws, and the law of order is one of them. So the number 5 is the number of change, the number of freedom, okay? The number of adjustments. And so if you have a 5 life path from your date of birth, then you need to learn how to use freedom, how to make constructive change versus destructive change, and have freedom to do that. And most people do not understand this, and particularly most people who don't have the number 5 don't understand this. But the number 5 also affects all of us, as in a 5 cycle or a 50-year cycle, which we are now in, a 50-year cycle, particularly in America, where we have big changes every 50 years. So the big change that's going on right now is the ending of the Reagan era, which started in 1980. So we have, if you go 50 years forward, you will go to 2030, which is when the Reagan era dies. That's the end of it. And you're seeing now the total trying to reincarnate the Reagan era, but it won't last. It was not supposed to last more than this time frame. So you're seeing a lot of, I call discombobulation going on in America as it finishes up this Reagan era, particularly in the Republican elections right now, and trying to hang on to the shiny hill or what have you, or Morning in America and what have you, all things from the Reagan era. The Reagan era is the 50-year cycle. You go back 50 years before that, and you will hit the beginning of the Depression, the Great Depression. Okay, and so these cycles are, so 1930 was the beginning of the Great Depression, 1980 was the beginning of the Reagan era, and then in 1990 we will have another era final. And so we want to understand that these 5 cycles bring big change, and they have to have somewhat of a crisis to bring on the big change. Okay, so you can expect, as a part of this gift of big change, it doesn't have to be anything dramatic like a war or anything like that, but if you go back to the 70s, before the Reagan era, you understand the tumult was going on in America during the 10 years in preparation of that new period. We had the 70s and liberation and sexual liberation and Roe versus Wade and all that kind of stuff, and freedom, women burned bras and matchas and all that. And then we had the Reagan era, which was going back to what a more conservative, more corporate power. So this is when the corporate power really kicked off in the 80s. And if you had the movies, because movies always are way showers of what's coming. And so you want to look at the 80s, and one of the things that 80s had was women who had big shoulder pads in their clothing, and the movie of the period was Wall Street, and that the line was from Gordon Gekko in that movie, which was greed is good. And so that kind of began the period of greed. Not that we always haven't been greedy, but that began the real period, and that's what's coming to an end. And you can see the fallout now in the 2020s of this period of that started in 1980. So we will finish this 5 and bring the change which is needed when this ends. So we're now in that flex period like the 70s. That's why you're revisiting things of the 70s. You're revisiting Roe versus Wade again. where we are reversing it, and yet we're fighting over it in these state by states. That's going to take time for it to settle down. It'll take time for the rest of the 20s to get it resolved. And then we will start a new period in the 2030s, which is a whole different ballgame, but that's down the road. But this is your 50-year cycle, okay? And so remember the 5, it's about change. It's a catalyst for change. It's required because we cannot move forward without change. We have sometimes very disruptive changes, but the 5 is about freedom and change. And America has a life path of the number 5. So she's constantly in flux, and she's constantly having to pay attention to these 50-year cycles as a 5 country. Even the letters USA, if you add them together, count the numbers, they will be a 5 as well. So the United States of America, born July 4, right? 1776 is a 5 life path. So it's the road of change. So we're a catalyst of change. And as we go through these 50-year cycles, it becomes a catalyst of change for this country. Now, getting to the number 8. The number 8 is considered karma in ancient mythology, ancient numbers. It's a very powerful number. It's the number of harvest. It's the number of manifestation. So we look for a societal thing every 80 years because that's several generations. So every 80 years, there's another huge change, and this is affecting the world. And that will take us back. If you go back 80 years, where will that lead us? So right now we go back 80 years, and we will find another event. We have the World War, and we have the Great Depression, and then we have the Civil War. Okay, so we have to go back 80 years, and when you hit the Civil War, people are comparing this period to the Civil War. Well, I do not believe we're going to have another Civil War, but I do believe we will again these two 50-year cycles and the big 80-year cycle of civilization in a way. It has to go through a crisis to change. It can't keep going the way it is. Okay, it just can't keep going. So we have to go back to the period of this cycle and what it represents. And it always, when these two combine, of the institutions and the societal changes that are coming to head, one of these periods was the Civil War. So people are very quick to say we're in a Civil War. That is not true. We can have change without a Civil War, although it's very common to have that type of activity to bring a crisis. The last Civil War brought, of course, America into a very different era, and then eventually the Industrial Age, which changed America completely. And as a result of the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution that began in the 1880s. Yeah, the 1880s, I got my dates correct here. So it's a 50-year cycle of institutions and an 80-year cycles of civilization. So we have to now look at where are we. There's other cycles going on, but these two are the big ones, 80 and the 50-year. So the 8 is about karma and is ruled by the planet Saturn, which is considered the Lord of Karma or Father Time. If you think of Father Time, you think of chronology and chronological order, and you think of the little sand time, and you think of all of these things that have to do with time, and it catches up with you. So 8 is always considered the harvest. What did you sow? So what are you going to reap? So right now, it's very important to take a look at where was the society 80 years ago, okay, and 80 years before that, and 80 years before that. If you go back 80, you're going to hit the American Revolution. So it seemed to be a war would always change the situation. The first one we'll go back will be the American Revolution, okay, and then the next one will be the Civil War. Okay, and then the next, you see, go on and on and on. You get World War II, da-da-da-da-da. And so we have to take a look at these huge karmic cycles that we pay for what we have done or what we have not done. So be aware that these cycles are going on no matter whether you're in a Democratic world or you're in a Republican world. They're going to go on regardless of party. It's not to do with party. Party's a result of these cycles. They're a result. They're not a cause. And so what's going to have to be changed? How is society going to change? All of these things. And that will be included in a different YouTube. But I just want you to remember, 8, if you have an 8 life path, you like to be in control. It's power, it's time, it's authority. So we are in that now. And you see it and feel it and hear it. And so everybody's angry at everybody and violent and all this kind of stuff. It's a rebellion as part of the big 80-year cycle change. So we have several more years to complete this, right through the 20s. So the 20s, what I consider will be tumultuous, and I've said that before, and until we get past the election of 2028, this thing doesn't really start to get a direction or a healing, but you have to go through crisis, and we have not gone there yet. And I don't really know what that crisis will be. I do not believe it's a war. I hope it's not a war, but people need to be aware and start thinking about, if there was a war, say there was, how would that go about? Would it be coming from external? We've already had COVID, and that wasn't really the crisis. It changed society, but it wasn't the crisis. And so we want to take a look at this, and we'll wait and see, and we'll go for another YouTube. So I want to thank you for listening and watching. If you have any more questions for me about cycles, or you want a session and go over your own blueprint, because everybody has one. Everybody has a blueprint. You just don't know it, and you don't know what it is. And it happens to be your exact registered birth name and your date of birth. That's your blueprint. And you need to understand your name is not created here. It's given to you because it's impressed upon the person's subconscious to give to you at birth. But you named yourself prior to coming in here, prior to entry into this birth, into this incarnation. So I look forward to talking with you again, and thank you always for listening.